Hi, everyone. Welcome to Big Tent USA. My name is Kitty Douglas, and I am president of Big Tent. We are steadfast in our commitment to defending our democratic values, the Constitution, and the rule of law. Our goal is to empower you with facts and calls to action so you can become a stronger, more effective advocate for the country we all love. This week, we are promoting Scott Galloway's Resist and Unsubscribe, a coordinated campaign that attacks tech companies and firms enabling ICE to inflict maximum damage with minimal impact on consumers. The link is in the chat. We are thrilled to welcome couriers Camaron Stevenson and Nina Burleigh, along with incomparable Kimberly Atkins Stohr to Big Tent USA. Nina is a journalist, best-selling author, documentary producer, and publisher of a Substack on politics called American Freak Show, a contributing editor at the New Republic and a frequent contributor to the New York Times and New York Magazine. Her journalism has been published widely. She is the author of 8 books on an array of topics, including archaeological forgery, scientists in the 18th century Egypt, James Smithson, Amanda Knox in Italy, and Trump's wives. Camaron Stevenson is the national correspondent for Courier Newsroom and founding editor, and was chief political correspondent for the Copper Courier. He is the author of Below the Beltway, another great newsletter on Substack. Kimberly Atkins Stohr is a senior opinion writer and columnist at the Boston Globe. She is also on MSNBC, a frequent panelist on NBC's Meet the Press, and a co-host of the weekly Politicon legal news podcast, Sisters-in-Law. Another great must listen. And she was the inaugural columnist for The Emancipator, a collaboration between the Boston Globe and Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research that reframes the conversation about racial justice and equality. Camaron, Nina, and Kimberly, thank you so much for coming to Big Tent. Kimberly, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Kitty. And thanks to all of you for joining us today for this really important conversation about where we are at this point with the release of some of the Epstein files and the accountability and the money and the power that they are revealing. So we don't have much time, so I want to jump right into this and start with questions. So I have questions. I've also incorporated some of the questions that our attendees submitted ahead of time. We think alike, so I've incorporated some of them, but we will turn to questions for the second half of this discussion, as Kitty said. So, Cam, given the news today, the very topical news about the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in the UK, along with news about resignations and others being charged in the UK, in France, in Norway, it seems that the accountability that is coming out of the information that we've seen in recent weeks from the Epstein files release is happening in other countries at a greater speed than it is happening here in the United States, where it's landed in large part with not much more than a whimper. What do you think? What do you account for in the differences in how people are being held accountable here in the US versus there? And what can we learn from them in order to bring greater accountability here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the way people are being treated in different countries really speaks to just the lack of justice our Justice Department is seeking in the Epstein case. I mean, these are other countries who, one, it started off with resignations, right? There were, people in the UK chambers who resigned and different people voluntarily left their posts because they were ashamed. We don't have that in the United States anymore at large. People who are named, they either proudly deny it or they make something up. And then, even though we're the ones who did the investigation, we never shared this with our allies. Otherwise, these investigations would have happened back in 2019. We kept it to ourselves. We hid it. Under the first Trump administration, they ended the criminal case. And then when he came back, he finished the job by closing the investigation completely. And what that means is accountability in the United States has to be due to popular demand. People have to want it because the government has already said, case closed, there's nothing to see here. There were two criminals involved in this operation where thousands of people were abused and billions of dollars were spent. The only two people that the United States found were Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, and our government washed their hands of it. So it's really dependent on the people to take that power back and demand that something be done. There are members of Congress who want that change. It's just that the person who runs the country is also the person who is in almost every page of those files, and he has no interest in accountability.
Nina, I want you also to weigh in on this. I mean, we have seen members of the members of Congress holding hearings, bringing in some people for questioning, and the Epstein files has been one of the rare places of bipartisan cooperation, seeking the full release of the file and greater transparency from the Justice Department. Do you see that as one of the avenues where greater accountability can be had?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I agree with Cam that that there has to be an outcry and a push for this. But I don't really agree that the American people are the ones who are going to be able to pull this off. Look, you're in Washington. They hoisted Trump's mugshot, giant banner of Trump's mugshot onto the Justice Department building today. I mean, if that doesn't tell you where we're at, I don't know what does. But if you go back to Watergate, what enabled this country to boot out that corrupt regime? It was that his own party was on the committee and they made it happen. So it's up to the House. They are our representatives, and the Republicans in the House have got to step up. And you see them doing it a little bit. You see, surprisingly, Nancy Mace, our heroine, Marjorie Taylor Greene, sadly, on her way out after finally seeing the light, right, about Trump. So, but still, there some of these women stepping up a little bit, men, Massey, and there just have to be more. There needs to be a critical mass of Republicans ready to stand up to their mob boss.
Yeah. So, Nina, one thing that your reporting has really helped crystallize for me is the fact that this is not just a case. I mean, it would be bad enough if this were just a case about a massive trafficking operation of women and children, countless, who knows how many hundreds, if not more, survivors and people who did not survive this abuse and this crime. That would be bad enough. But the Epstein files have revealed so much more. It's about money, it's about power. And Jeffrey Epstein was at the center of it. You had some of the most powerful people in the world seeking him out, not just to go to his island of horrible things, but also to connect him with other powerful people. Can you help us sort of contextualize that? Because I don't think that Americans really appreciate that aspect of it.
Yeah, well, I can help you up to a point. I can't explain how after he gets out of, the whatever sleepover camp that the Palm Beach slap on the wrist was, his, sleeping in jail and then going back home during the day to carry on with the sex massages and so on. He was a sex offender after that. He was a felon. And what we see in these records is that after that, after 2008 and 2009, his influence and his network is like on steroids. It's exploding. And suddenly he's got, MBS on speed dial. And, the sheikhs all over the Middle East are his buddies. He's pals with these Norwegian diplomats who are running the Oslo Accords. He was pals with the Norwegian former Prime Minister Jagland, spent 3 nights at his Paris pad during Fashion Week, which we know was Jeffrey Epstein's hunting season. And then within this country, mind-boggling levels of influence and access. Well, we found out that he, in the paper, in these documents, we can see that he rented his jet to the State Department. This is the Lolita Express, his 727. The State Department in April of 2011, a few months after Benghazi. We know that Hillary Clinton wants this revolution in Libya, but they use his plane to fly State Department people into Libya in April of that year. He's pals with the deputy director of the deputy secretary of state Bill Burns, who ended up becoming the CIA director under Biden. He's got Bill Burns on speed dial. He's having personal meetings with Bill Burns, the deputy secretary of state from 2011 to 2014, who was previously the ambassador to Russia. The networking capacity of this man with world leaders was so great that even he was so mobbed up with the head of Davos, the Norwegian director of the what's it called, the World Economic Forum, that he was having he was having that director over for dinner on the same day that he was moving. You can see on the scheduling emails that he's moving girls in from, Finnair flight 16 is, coming in with a girl from Siberia, and she's got to go to Frederick Fakai to get her hair done. And that night he's got the Davos director having dinner with him in his mansion where these girls are being moved in and out. And he's so connected to the Davos system that Larry Summers went through him to get an invitation to Davos in 2019. After he's dead, Larry Summers, Epstein dies in 2019, and in the winter of 2020, Larry Summers is at Davos giving a speech about globalization and so on. But wow. His invitation was due to him begging Epstein to get him in there. And he's got back channel connections with Putin. I could go on and on. So the amount of influence, the level of influence, mind-boggling.
So is that, Cam, another area that lawmakers should be looking into? Because, I mean, if you think about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, he is right now, he was arrested on suspicion of having used his influence to disclose confidential information to Epstein. It's not at this point related to his alleged ties to the trafficking. So this feels like a very ripe area of investigation for both the Justice Department and Congress.
Yes, absolutely. This is the financial aspect is something I've been covering since I started reporting on Epstein. Sexual abuse and the allegations that are in these emails and the files and the back and forth that these wealthy elites have, those are hard to prove in court. But what you can prove is what Andrew is going to be on trial for, which is a paper trail, financial transactions. I was speaking with Representative Yasmin Ansari. She was in a deposition with Les Wexner yesterday. Les Wexner, he is the billionaire who bankrolled Epstein. He was in charge of the Limited, Victoria's Secret, all of that. And Les Wexner gave him a ton of money. By their accounts, about $1 billion. And what Congress is trying to get right now is the financial records to tie Epstein to Wexner, and then it can go to other, wealthy billionaires like Leon Black. And then a lot of these bank records, it's transactions from U.S. banks to Russian banks that are sanctioned that we're not supposed to be using because of the illicit activity. It goes through Swiss accounts or whatever. And then it goes to Eastern European countries where he trafficked girls from. And so gaining access to these documents, which again, the Trump administration has, the US Treasury has all of these things. Many of these, they're required to release to the public and they're illegally withholding them. But it's all there. It's just a matter of someone taking the time to look, connect the dots, and show where the money went. Because, if there's one thing the government won't stand, it's them not getting their cut. That's what took Al Capone down. That's going to apparently take down the British monarchy, and that's how they're going to be able to pin down Epstein and his accomplices.
So you talk about the illegally withheld documents. There is by law a directive to release all of the files. right now, roughly half, if we can quantify it, have been released.
Half that
When
they
might
admit
we?
to, yeah.
Yes, half that they
Sorry.
admit to. So when might we get all these unredacted files released, and what will it take? Will it take lawsuits, Cam, a whistleblower coming forward? And we've got a lot of questions from our audience about how can this be investigated in a way that the public can trust? Who can be the unbiased arbiter of what is in these files?
Right. And that's the most difficult thing is that people have been lied to about this for so long, and there's so much there. You know, you could spend a decade researching this and barely scratch the surface. That it's going to take, I think, a change in Congress, because Congress can compel things to happen. But right now, like Nina said, the Republicans who control the House and the Senate are very much more, they're more interested in protecting Donald Trump, who again is in the files extensively, more so than giving transparency to the people. So I think we would need to have a change in congressional leadership, and then maybe a special counsel. But even then, I don't know how effective that would be under the Trump administration, because again, he utilizes the Department of Justice as his own personal law firm. I mean, the people, the guy running the Epstein, fronting Epstein, Todd Blanche, he is Donald Trump's criminal attorney who represented him during his criminal trials. And so it's going to be difficult under this administration and almost impossible under this Congress.
Nina, I want to talk to you about that too, how we find accountability and what's the role of the press? I mean, I think the one of the differences perhaps in the United States versus what we're seeing in other countries is there has been this drumbeat of the press connecting the dots from what we've learned from these files in a way that perhaps hasn't been happening as aggressively here in the United States.
Well, I mean, I think the press is doing as much as it possibly can. Now, I mean, the Wall Street Journal is, it's that company. Well, obviously Murdoch not loving Trump right now, but I mean, it's a conservative editorial page, and their reporters are doing a kick-ass job. And I think,
Mhm.
I think the Times could have done better for years when this was all going on. They are in New York, and Epstein is a New Yorker, and all of these people that he was involved with were New Yorkers, and they were all establishment characters. And I think so you have this kind of problem with, the Times, the people that Epstein was engaged with, like Larry Summers, are part of the establishment that gets, op-eds in the New York Times and so on. So they weren't going to expose those people. And I think, to one, the Trump administration, right now, obviously isn't going to expose Donald. Um, but to their credit, and I think, I've said this a couple of times in the last few days, I think look, take the long view in 20 years, this period, assuming that we're not all, we've all stopped reading and just creating electricity for the data centers and going to working at hospitals because nobody reads anymore, assuming that we still have historians, they're going to look at this time as a fulcrum and kind of like maybe the Church Committee with the CIA. Things are being exposed here. And the Trump administration will get credit for this. They are not because they were forced, they're back to the wall. They had to do this. But as somebody put into the chat here, Merrick Garland and Biden didn't dump this stuff on the public, and neither did they act on it. They sat on it, and so what's happened here is, of course, we know why they're releasing it. They're releasing it because they used this conspiracy theory about pedo elites. That was the shorthand, and they were, assumed to be Hillary Clinton eating babies and John Podesta, going to satanic meetings and so on. They
Yes.
used that conspiracy theory to juice their political movement. And then, oops, they were forced by that movement to expose this. And now, you see it coming out. So is there going to be accountability? I mean, we're talking about accountability for the public now, not just the victims. I think, eventually, yes, or as we're going along, look, how Lutnick is exposed now. I mean, maybe they'll keep him on in the cabinet, but I mean, that guy, they're accidentally exposing people, or maybe they decided Lutnick is dispensable, but will erase all of the Donald mentions in these files, which we know, and we reported this week that they are taking out mentions of Donald.
Yeah. So let's talk about the survivors and what accountability is for them, Nina. What do you think accountability looks like for them, and what can be done to ensure, importantly, that there is never anything like this that happens again?
Well, I don't know what can be done for them specifically, individually. I think that in general, there is what's happened to them and what is revealed, the extent of the psychological manipulation, this sort of evil Pygmalion stuff that's going on with these guys, Brunel, Epstein, Trump, where they just and then they're Johns, basically, their customers, their clients, they're pimping these women out. What this shows us is that during the last 20 or 30 or 40 years of women really, getting into law schools and filling law firms and getting into corporations and all of these advances that women have made in politics, and the numbers that are growing, and the some increases in self-reliance and autonomy and so on. While that was all going on, there was this underpinning of really powerful men with just scorn and contempt for females, and that's what this shows us. And I think that is something that it's exposed. It's, women should be aware of it. I mean, we're living in a period of intense retrenchment and backlash against women right now. And I think that this story exposes the true power relations that women are facing, and women are going to have to confront that. And how do we stop this from happening to younger women? Well, right now, the trad wife movement, the whole transactional relationship between men and women that Trump and Melania represent is, in fact, right in front of our eyes. And, women are just going to have to make these choices, and our daughters are going to have to make these choices to resist it.
Yeah. I find it really interesting on that point about how this administration is treating and sort of framing women is fascinating, given that a lot of the policies, including what is going on behind the release or the not release of these files, are being driven by men, people in the White House, but women are the face of it. You have women who are the face of at DHS, at DOJ, while at the same time, these policies that are subjugating the rights of women are taking place. I think it's quite a bit of a kabuki theater there. So, Camaron, before we get to Q&A, I want to ask you and Nina, why does it seem that accountability has taken so long? The first time Jeffrey Epstein was charged for trafficking women was 20 years ago. It has taken 20 years and a drumbeat from across the ideological spectrum demanding the release of these documents to get to where we even are today, where some people, maybe not in America, but in other parts of the world, are finally being held accountable. Why did that take so long? And I'm asking that so what we can figure out what we can learn to ensure that we don't have to wait 20 more years if this happens again.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to what Nina was just talking about. We live in a very misogynistic patriarchy where women aren't believed. Men are given the benefit of the doubt. Jeffrey Epstein in particular was given a sweetheart deal so that he was barely in jail when he got arrested. In the files, they talk about his conviction as if it was nothing. It's an easy pass. And so I think that's a lot of structural things that would need to change before we see any significant accountability. I mean, in the United States, we would need to hold our politicians to the same standards we're seeing in other countries. I think, Donald Trump needs to be properly investigated. I think that the Epstein estate shouldn't be allowed to exist anymore. I think that should be liquidated and the assets be given to the victims. Because right now, his accomplices are the beneficiaries of that. And it has actually increased in wealth since he died
Oh,
because of
wow.
investments he made. Yeah, he made investments with Peter Thiel, of all people, before he died. And his estate has actually increased in wealth. And his known accomplices who we now see from the files, people who the FBI was investigating until it was shut down, are the beneficiaries of this sex trafficking ring. And so, I mean, that's a start. I think that needs to happen. I think that women in Congress and men in Congress need to unite and understand that this is not a Republican Democratic separation. This is class and power, that these are wealthy, powerful individuals who will throw any of you under the bus once you're no longer useful. Marjorie Taylor Greene's a prime example. She was useful until she wasn't. And once she had
Yeah.
questions, they threw her away. She received the same kind of hate that victims receive, because people who support Donald Trump, they're violent. They're aggressive. People who oppose his presidency in any form get death threats. They get harassed. Their family gets attacked. And, she got a taste of that. Any victim that's been brave enough to come forward, they get that on a daily basis. And as we allow that to happen, that's, that the accountability that we're seeing now just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah. Nina?
Well, I agree with Cam about the liquidation. I hadn't thought about that. Obviously, Indike and Kahn still making money. Indike, in fact, in a law firm with Tim Parlator, who is Hegseth's number one advisor. It's incredible how these people are all hooked up together. But yeah, I mean, why did it take so long? Again, I'll just go back to many of them didn't see anything wrong with treating women the way he was treating them. It's the foul underpinning of our society, and I call it Epsteinism. I'm going to start calling it Epsteinism. It's the inability to see women as fully human. And I did see a note here that somebody said, stop calling them women. No, I won't stop calling them women. A lot of them, most of them were over 18, these trafficked women. Yes, Epstein had the sick kink of wanting teenagers and young teenagers. But most of these trafficked women, the vast majority of them, these people he's bringing in from Europe, they're over 18. Is there some kind of line between a 16-year-old female and an 18-year-old female where all of a sudden when you're 18, you're not able to be victimized by the kind of manipulation that this guy was exercising on them? No, they're women, and this is an anti-female underpinning to the whole system that I think is the big problem. That's the reason that the accountability took so long. They're not believed because they're not looked at as fully human by the police, by the FBI, and by the men who were engaged in this.
And to that point, even those who spoke out, who were brave enough to speak out, many of them did so when they were women. And, today I've been thinking a lot about Virginia Giuffre, who very bravely spoke about the former prince, and she did not get to see this day when accountability seems to at least start to come for him. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kitty so that we can get to some of the questions from our attendees.
Thank you so much. This has been really depressing and interesting, and we needed to hear this from the three of you. In the United States and what we're seeing and what we saw in the last week, two things that really struck me just sort of tracking the news was the fact that you had, congressional reps going into the room the FBI had set up where people could see the full file or the unredacted files, and coming out and really seeming to be, like they'd been hit by a truck from what they had been reading. Lauren Boebert, never been a fan, to be perfectly honest. She was very clear that, Ghislaine Maxwell should not be in the prison she currently is and should never be released. Ted Lieu has said that Trump is all over this. So I'd love to get each one of you to sort of chime in on, what you have taken away from hearing from folks about that experience. If there's lessons, if there's things that we can learn from what you were hearing from people in Congress about that. And I'll let you, Kim, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, what we're seeing from the redactions or the unredacted sections that the members of Congress are talking about is that they are redacting things that shouldn't be taken out. They are still even the things that they publish and say this is what the public needs to see. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of redactions of accomplices, of clients. I'm actually working with a few members of Congress to get some information about unredacted files because there are lists of co-conspirators and there are people who are connected to Epstein's bank accounts whose names are blacked out. They shouldn't be. And these, again, are more than just salacious emails. There's emails and video and all sorts of things that are abhorrent. But what's really going to hold up in court, isn't accusing an 80-year-old president of rape before a jury. That's going to be hard to find a jury to convict. But showing finances, showing, hey, he gave him this property, or he paid him, $400,000 for something that's worth $10,000, and suddenly these women are part of his beauty pageant. That's something where you can create plausibility and you can create a narrative and motive for crime. And so that's what I think is the most blatant, is that there are important things being hidden. And like Nina said earlier, once they find out something was released that they don't want the public to know, they just take it away. Because they are very, they're not really good at this, but they're very upfront about what they want to hide.
And can I just make a point that it's compounded by the fact that the DOJ has, as was said, okay, this is it. Our work is done here. It would be one thing if there were these redactions, but that there are prosecutors or the FBI investigating what that redacted information is. And you can say, okay, we didn't want to just put this out here before we knew that it was verified, that, there's unverified things that are in this, that we could actually make this case. But the fact that that's not happening at all is what compounds this idea. I think the public could get behind, hey, let's not name everybody in this before we know they've committed a crime. They can't get behind just protecting them, and we never know.
Yeah, and them saying, no matter what you report, we've already looked into it and we're not going to investigate. It's absurd.
Yeah. Cam put together an incredible searchable database. So if you want it, he took the first, every time documents get dumped, he organizes it in a way that makes a lot more sense. I think we've heard from our guests tonight that when the DOJ dumps these files, it's just a scattershot, and everyone has to go in and really do the research. So Cam has started this database to help people be able to find the facts that they're looking for much easier. So I wanted to move to another scene that we saw last week, which was Pam Bondi testifying in front of Congress and the performance that she put in. And I just, obviously people have been talking about this, but I wanted to get from the three of you what your takeaways were that maybe those of us who just watched like the clips on Instagram missed. So Nina, why don't you start?
Well, I mean, obviously it was a spectacle of, I guess, somebody losing her mind. I mean, she's just unhinged and so rude. And the spectacle of the top law enforcement official in this country calling a congressman by his last name and shouting them down, and it's just obscene. I mean, I don't know what else you can say about it. It's on brand with what they're up to there. which is bullying and profanity and lowering the discourse, the political discourse that, Trump came on the scene and started, and they're racing to the bottom. I honestly don't think there's a bottom floor with these people.
Yeah. Kim, what'd you see when Pam Bondi was not testifying, but throwing her fits?
I think the thing that stuck with me the most, that when given an opportunity to show some humanity for the survivors who were in that room, she didn't just miss that opportunity, decline to take that opportunity. Her smug dismissal of it, she seemed quite proud of. And that says a lot about when the chief DOJ law enforcement official has absolutely no visible humanity toward people who had their lives ruined. How can I trust that even if there were investigations into this, that they would be done so with the care and the sense of justice they deserve? So I thought that in itself, even aside from the other performance, was honestly disqualifying for her to be Attorney General.
Yeah. Camaron, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think her response to the victims is the same as the reason that they have left a lot of information about victims unredacted, is that they're sending them a message that this isn't about justice for them. This is about justice for their boss. And speaking up, standing up, it's only going to cause them pain and suffering. I think she did a fantastic job at what she went there to do, which was go to bat for the Trump administration. That's what the entire administration is about this time around. First term, it was about, we're serious people. We demand respect. This time, it's all about loyalty. And she could have done anything as long as it wasn't to go against Trump or to implicate him in any way or to apologize for their actions. As long as she didn't do those things, she got an A+ with the audience of one that she was performing for. And so that's what it was. I wish there was something more substantial we could have gotten out of it. Unfortunately, committee hearings of that prominence, what happens is, people on the left, they get the clips of what they want. People on the right get the clips of what they want, and everyone declares victory. And nothing really happens, unfortunately.
Yeah. One of our guests tonight, Evangeline, has asked if there's any way that states can really start to hold these people accountable. Obviously, New Mexico, was it yesterday? I can't keep track. But New Mexico announced that they're launching an investigation into Zorro Ranch, which has completely been off limits. So I'd love to just get each one of you to sort of weigh in and just see if there are other avenues for states to hold some of these perpetrators accountable. So Nina, why don't we start with you?
Well, I mean, there has been a lot of talk about state attorney generals stepping up and resisting a lot of things that this administration is doing, right? And one of my sources who works for one of the governors in one of the blue states said, I said, what about the idea of them all banding together, these governors, and sort of stepping up? And this person said, unlikely. They're all going to run for president. So the Democrats are not in league. They're not arm in arm here right now. And I think the takeaway for me is you're not going to see accountability. You're not going to see justice for these people until after November. And after November, it is absolutely crucial that the Democrats, if they win, and this goes on into 2028, when they win back power, they have got to make these people accountable. And the problem is they don't do that. They didn't do that after when Obama came in with the bankers and the crash. They did not. They decided not to do that. They decided not to go back and look at the Iraq War lies, but just to keep skating along, moving forward. They cannot do this now. The Democrats have to grow some spine. They have got to go in there, and the people who are voting for them have to demand that when they come in and they take power again, they have to put these people on trial. They are breaking laws every day. Every day they're breaking the law. Every day. It's the most corrupt administration that's in my lifetime, and I think in American history. And they have to put them on trial. They have to prosecute, they have to hold hearings, and they have to do it through the Justice Department, and they have to do it through Congress. So it's really up to the Democrats, and I don't know if they've got it in them to pull that off, but we hope they do.
So, yeah, I agree with Nina to the extent that we're talking about members of the administration. I think that is the only solution. When it comes to people who may be co-conspirators in the Epstein affair, whether it is the abuse of women and children, or whether it's financial crimes or something, there is certainly things that state officials can do. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein had properties in New York, in Florida, in other places. If the laws in those states were violated, and there is evidence that attorneys generals or prosecutors can look at to bring charges in places where, the statutes of limitations have not passed, they can and should do that. They can still face accountability. And what is beneficial to that is for these co-conspirators, to the extent that there are any that Trump has not already dropped as a hot potato as soon as, the heat is applied to them, he can't pardon them for state convictions. So I think that it is incumbent that every prosecutor and attorney general's office, wherever any of this crime took place in the United States, should be investigating that.
Yeah. Cam, you talk to folks, you talk to our legislators a lot. You're in DC. Are you hearing that there's an appetite to just continue to hammer on this issue all the way to the midterms and then beyond?
I am, but people are looking for something tangible. They're looking for signs of accountability. They're looking for actual action that can amount to something. So during Wexner's deposition in Ohio, so the members of Congress, they went out there, deposed him, and the people I spoke with, like when they announced that they were going, they suddenly got contacted by people from Ohio. Just a bunch of people from Ohio started reaching out and saying, hey, I have a tip. Wexner, he's also involved in the Ohio Ohio University sexual abuse. He's involved in these other things. I've been a witness to this. And so people are starting to come forward with stories, and that can amount to something. And so I think, whereas, on the flip side, there's going to be, the deposition or the hearing with the Clintons. And that is going to be a circus. And that is going to be purposefully a circus to make people cynical and to get people to tune out. And so I think members of Congress, as long as they keep hearing about it, and this might tie into the last question, which is what people can do. One recommendation I have, which is very easy, very low lift, is to contact your members of Congress and give them specific file names from the Epstein files that are unusual to you, or that have redactions that you don't think should be there, and ask them about it. Email, be like, hey, it says that this is a person who sent Epstein an email that said, thanks for the little girl. Why is their name blacked out? Can you look and check and tell me why this name is blacked out? The members are going, if nothing else, out of curiosity, they're going to review the unredacted files. And so if they get file names, file numbers, they're going to go look it up. Even if it's a Republican in the deepest red district that you're in, they are still interested, and they still have, I guess, an abject responsibility in their minds to protect people. Even though they do it in a very, very different and usually ineffective way. So that's what I would say. And could I also, someone, Karen in the chat, she mentioned something about the subpoenas for Epstein's records.
Yeah.
This is a story this is a story I've been working on.
No.
But so I can give you an update that Senator Wyden, his committee has still not received anything from the Treasury, but the House Oversight Committee has received the Treasury documents. I've spoken with some of the members on the committee, some of the staff, and they have been going through it. It's a legal nightmare, just because there's a lot of very highly sensitive information. But if you're curious of finding some of those financial documents that are in the Epstein files, there are a few specific search terms you can use. The first one is if you search for the acronym KYC, it stands for Know Your Customer. These are things banks are required to do when people are suspected of money laundering. There are countless KYC checks on Epstein. The next is a SARS report, SARS, Suspicious Activity Report. Again, there are emails between Deutsche Bank people internally saying, I don't think we should clear him. And they're like, well, he makes us a lot of money, so we're going to clear him. But it has the names of other people involved in his accounts. Also, just the names of his banks, Bank of New York Mellon, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America. There's a bunch of other ones. But if you search for those in the files, these financial records will turn up.
I wanted to ask you all to answer this question because it's been something that has been bothering me. I remember in 2020, the height of COVID in the summer, going to visit friends on the Cape, and I listened to Will Sommer, who had been reporting on this thing called QAnon. And I'd never heard of QAnon before, and he had been tracking it as it sort of gained traction on social media during lockdown. And and at the heart of it was this idea of this satanic cabal that were trafficking girls. And of course, there was all kinds of crazy things around it. But it does feel like there's a basis of there's a core to QAnon that does sort of tie into Epstein. And I'm just wondering if you guys can parse out for us how we sort of break out the crazy conspiracy theories that we all like, Pizzagate and all these crazy things, and the Clintons drank children's blood, with what we are learning about the world that Jeffrey Epstein created and fomented, and just the fact that so many men were participating in it. I know it's a lot, but it's something that I continue to go back to, is this just feeds the conspiracy. This just continues to elevate this very, very potent identity for a lot of people, a lot of Americans. So it's a lot to think about, and I don't know who wants to take it first, but
well, I'll
Nina,
take
great.
I'll take that because I talked about that already a little bit. I think about it all the time. I too remember the rise of that conspiracy theory like everyone else, and I was at the time writing about Trump and his women and his pageants and the treatment of women and the cabal that he belonged to in New York. And it was clear then that there was something very strange going on, because they were able to take what actually was happening behind the scenes with these people and literally flipping it onto Hillary Clinton and John Podesta. Now, there's Russian influence going on there. There's, to me, the QAnon, the kernel of QAnon has been investigated, and they've found, these two guys who were like in the Philippines who were doing these things on 4chan, and then somehow and Mike Flynn was involved, and it's it looks like a psyop. You see Epstein kind of talking about it, and Bannon talking about it. It's a psyop. It seemed to me that it starts off as a psyop, and they just caught these they gulled people who were it has a lot to do with the the Christian white Christian evangelicals in this country and their weird obsessions, and they fed into that. But it's always been absolutely mind-boggling to think about the fact that they were able to take this person, Donald Trump, who was a predator and now a convicted predator of women and known to be a predator of women and known to be an abuser of women, and turn him into the the savior who was put on this planet by God to rescue little children from satanic child blood sucking liberals. It's incredible that they were able to pull that off. People have written about it. I think there's a guy named Jim Stewartson who studies this stuff. He's online. You can follow him on Twitter. He's done a lot of research into this. And I think you just have to look at the things that happened in Russia. Read a book called The Wizard of the Kremlin. They pulled off in Russia, they pull off these outrageous kind of mind games, mass mind games. And I think that's what this was. And I think that, you're looking at now what's happening is with these files coming out, the FBI has to field all allegations. So there's a lot of material in these files where somebody crazy has called in and said, "Oh, I saw Donald Trump, raping babies and on a yacht in Lake Michigan, throwing a baby overboard." And there's a lot of this stuff. There's enough of it in there that the DIY investigators, which again, that has to do with the whole Pizzagate thing. There are all these people who can now look at stuff and sort of don't really know what they're talking about, but get into the mainstream and talk about it. You see that satanic panic stuff rising up again. You can see it on Substack. You can see people it's starting to bubble up. You see the word. Jeffrey Epstein used the word pizza often, and pizza is code for little girl. And, all of this sort of, so anyway, that's my explanation, my take on it.
Yeah. Kimberly or Camaron, who would like to go next on this journey?
I mean, I have not done the kind of deep reporting that Nina has done. I think all I can say is it makes it even more important that we actually have people going through these actual real files that we have to look to see if there is evidence of actual crimes, and having those be charged and having those be put before judges and juries. Because once you have that is something that people can see and grasp onto. That is not, a pizzeria in DC that is where all these mythical things are happening. That's something tangential that feels like that everybody can grasp. The more tangible facts that we have, the more transparency that we have, the less room there is, the fewer gaps there are for people who are going down these conspiratorial paths to fill in. So I think that's the importance of transparency. That's the importance of investigations that come up with something. So that's why hopefully in an administration soon, we will have an FBI that's willing to do that. We'll have a Justice Department that's willing to do that. Hopefully right now we have some states that are willing to do that, because with every bit of accountability, I mean, people here, I know I felt a little bit of relief to see Andrew charged today, because that means that this mattered, that the voices of Virginia Giuffre and others, and that this, if I know that there is a lot of evidence showing that Andrew was very close to Epstein and knew exactly what he was doing, then some authority has to also see this too. And the more we see that, the less we have to rely on these dark recesses of the web or Substacks or wherever the conspiracies are coming from.
Yeah. All right. Camaron, you get the last word.
I mean, I'll mostly just try and sum up what Nina and Kimberly said, is that one, like a lack of transparency and an allergy to accountability is why these sorts of conspiracy theories thrive. When the government is hiding something, that's why people come up with these things. I think that a lot of the reason Pizzagate and QAnon was propagated was a coordinated effort by people like Epstein and Steve Bannon, who were active on 4chan, who were familiar and experienced in manipulating people on those corners of the internet. You being able to utilize it as both normalization and projection, because if there's this insane conspiracy theory that there's a secret pedophile ring under a pizza shop, and there's all these like clearly absurd threads. it normalizes the idea, but also makes it seem like when you hear it again, it's going to be like, oh, it's another one of those things. It also made people who weren't on board less likely to believe it in the future. So when people said, hey, I think Jeffrey Epstein's running a secret elite underground sex ring, it's like, yeah, okay, another QAnon, whatever. It also, it normalizes it. It's repeating it, and so people, to an extent, think like, well, I don't know if it's happening or not. That's part of Bannon's fire hose strategy. I don't know what the truth is or not, so I'm just going to tune out of it completely. And that's what this sort of thing does. And until there is transparency, until there is accountability, then there's just going to be more conspiracy theories, and people are going to keep tuning out.
Well, that's depressing, Cam.
But that's,
I know.
that's not the case. I think we're seeing a boomerang of consequences. I think it's started in Europe. I think that because there's consequences in Europe, honestly, it could be a partially American exceptionalism that makes people think, well, shit, we got to do something too. We can't let the Brits have all the arrests in here.
Yeah.
And so, whatever it is, I think it is leading to something.
Well, and I think the three of you really hammered home the fact that we all need to be diligent, that this is on it. It's all on us, that we need to continue to talk to our representatives, our senators, and that we need to honor the victims. And the way we do that is by making sure that they are going to pursue justice, even if the federal government won't do it. They can, our state reps can, our governors, our attorney generals. So I really appreciate the three of you for reminding us that. And I just want to remind everyone to check out Nina's excellent Substack, American Freak Show, Cam's excellent Substack, Below the Beltway, and Kimberly's newsletter, The Gavel. All the links will be there. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming to Big Tent tonight. We'll see you very soon. And Kimberly, Nina, and Camaron, take care. Keep doing the good work that you're doing. Good night, everybody.